So that left us with this challenge of creating this hybrid model, right? Which is what we now think of as this team of teams, right? It's not enough to have individual great teams. I need to connect them across the organization, up into the leadership in multiple different ways, and create a network set of high-performance teams that interact with one another in a very fluid way, while respecting and understanding the roles and specific areas of focus that need to sit within the traditional black line bureaucracy, right? So you had to become comfortable as this team of teams connected model, living inside of those two worlds simultaneously. Where and when do I need to send information and make decisions in a more linear bureaucratic fashion? And where and when do I have the freedom and autonomy and expectation from my leadership and other teams to operate as this network dynamic, right? So this sort of hybrid structure is what we now think of when we talk about becoming a team of teams. And so there were a few big areas that, this is all in hindsight, that were really tackled to get there. So I'll walk through those briefly and acknowledge that, for every one thing that in hindsight turned out to be the right solution, there were lots of things that turned out not to be the right solution, right? And so one of the best things that we advise organizations to do, and that our leadership did for us, was just at the outset to say, look, the environment's shifting around us, right? We're in this age of sort of network dynamics as well as traditional competitors. And so we have to assume that a lot of stuff in the rule book that's written inside this bureaucratic space is no longer applicable, right? So experiment, take chances. If it doesn't work, get rid of it quickly. And if there's a traditional rule that isn't helping us solve these other problems, let's challenge it and change it so that we can move fast where we need to. But that requires a different type of communication from leaders, because if I'm on the receiving end of that sort of guidance, I need to know from you, okay, you're talking about breaking rules, but you're also talking about maintaining the strength and stability of the bureaucratic process. So I need to know where your threshold lies, which rules can I adjust and break if necessary, and which ones have to remain steady inside the more traditional black line model. And so we could talk a bit more about how that evolved. But the key areas that, again, in hindsight, ended up being addressed were, and I'll put them into sort of big buckets here. One, the organization's approach to how it talked about the strategy of the enterprise, and I'll circle back to each of these. That led to a change in how we communicated and the sort of cadence of how that happened, both the norms and the cadence of communication, which increased, became more transparent. Again, I'll say a bit more about that in a moment. And ultimately led to the ability to decentralize a lot of our decision making, where and when it made sense, and to clear up what decisions needed to be retained up at the different layers of the traditional part of the organization. So decision making was the big area that was affected there, right? And all of that was underpinned by a significant change in sort of the culture of the organization and the behavior of not just the leadership, but all the way down to individual members of small teams, how they started to, the cultural lens that they started to embody themselves, which shifted from, high performance small team being the core of sort of my cultural connection. This 4-person unit, this 20-person team, that's sort of the box that I live inside of. And the theory being, if there's enough great teams like that, we'll eventually be able to scale our way to winning.